Law enforcement says there is a mountain of evidence that makes the case that a 17-year-old who mourned her parents publicly on TikTok is actually their killer. And just clarification on that, would you say you're interviewing potential suspects in this case?
We are interviewing potential suspects and anyone that we feel may have information.
The spokesperson of the Carroll County Sheriff's Office tells us what red flags stood out to investigators early on in this investigation, months before Sarah Grace Patrick was arrested, now accused of murder. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Hey, before we get started with this episode of On the Case, I want to make an announcement, and it's for all of you who love watching police body camera video. We know you love the action, but this is even better. Highlights from On Patrol Live are coming to YouTube. The show is live on the Reels channel and Reels Plus app every Friday and Saturday and follows police officers across the country with over 50 cameras rolling live. And let me tell you, it is wild. We are talking high-speed chases, intense standoffs, and everything in between. So head over to On Patrol Live's YouTube channel to catch it all and make sure to subscribe. The channel launches Monday, July 14th, and you can subscribe by clicking the link in the description. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. All right, let's get to this case that has been getting a lot of attention this week in Georgia involving the arrest of 17-year-old Sarah Grace Patrick. She is now accused of killing her mom and her stepdad as they slept in their house on February 20th. It took investigators roughly 6 months to make an arrest in this case. Sarah Grace Patrick is the girl who called 911 that night. She said that her little sister, who was just 5 years old at the time, found Kristen Brock and James Brock dead in their bed. But this week we learned that even though Sarah Grace Patrick was cooperative in the investigation and publicly was calling for attention to be brought to this case that went unsolved for months, law enforcement says she is the one who killed James and Kristen Brock.
Today we can confirm that an arrest has been made in the case. Kristen Brock's 17-year-old daughter, Sarah Grace Patrick, has been taken into custody and charged with 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of aggravated assault.
That was the news conference this week where law enforcement made the shocking announcement that Sarah Grace Patrick was going to be accused in these murders. And what makes it so shocking is the social media that has since gone viral as people are now looking through what Sarah Grace Patrick apparently said on apps like TikTok. I'll talk about that in just a moment. I'll also tell you why Sarah Grace Patrick's grandfather told me he's pushing back on some of the things that were said in that news conference. We'll get to that in just a moment. But let's talk about what we know when it comes to Sarah Grace Patrick, who is now an accused killer. She was 16 at the time of these murders. She lived in the house with her mom, Kristen, her stepdad, James, and their now 6-year-old daughter, her half-sister. Her biological parents were the Brocks. Sarah Grace spent time with the Brocks. That's where she lived. But she also spent time with her biological dad, who law enforcement tells us was with her during interviews with law enforcement throughout the investigation. In fact, he was the one who drove her to the sheriff's office so she could be arrested after she was told that there were going to be warrants out for her arrest related to the murders of her mom and stepdad. Sarah Grace Patrick's arrest did come as this huge shock to so many people, partly because of the social media and the digital footprint that it appears that she left behind. She started posting TikToks in the days, weeks, and months after the murders, memorializing her mom and stepdad. And she also posted videos like this showing her crying with makeup running down her face. She spoke at her parents' funeral at their church. Here's a clip of what she said per WSB TV.
Although there's nothing we can do to bring them back, we still have control over how we treat people.
Not only did she mourn publicly, she was also sending messages to true crime creators on TikTok encouraging them to cover this case.
Why would you ask me to cover a case where you are going to get arrested for taking your parents' lives?
That creator goes by allegedly, reportedly on TikTok. Not only does she have the direct messages that Sarah sent her, she has screenshots of the comments that Sarah left on her story responding to people's questions. And knowing what we know now and what Sarah Grace Patrick is accused of, It's chilling to see. Watch.
This person commented and said, from an investigative standpoint, it would seem that it was someone who knew them, hoping for answers and swift justice. Sarah Grace, the daughter and stepdaughter of these victims who has now been arrested, said most definitely was, since they knew the house.
This week, I also spoke with Sarah Grace Patrick's grandfather. His name's Dennis Nolan. He says he believes that his granddaughter is innocent. He believes this is a rush to judgment by law enforcement. He told me that he thinks they were under pressure to make an arrest, so they honed in on his granddaughter. You can find our full conversation in yesterday's episode of On the Case here on Law&Crime's YouTube channel. He also said that Sarah Grace Patrick has called him since she was arrested from jail. Here is that part of our conversation.
You know, she's taking it very hard. She swears by her innocence.
Have you spoken with her since her arrest?
Yes, she called me from the jail the day after, of course, pleading for me to help her get out. And she was just very upset and saying, please help me. And there's not much I can do at this point. I don't know what else to say. I mean, she's always been a good kid. I've always liked Sarah. She was always very friendly, and she never really asked for anything. She was a very, to me, she was just an ideal child. She had just graduated from high school. She was very proud of that. She was working 2 jobs. She was doing very well, and I don't understand what could have ever, if she did do this, what triggered it.
Law enforcement's been tight-lipped when it comes to specifics about the evidence they have that makes them so confident that Sarah Grace Patrick murdered her mom and her stepdad. But they have said they have a lot of evidence. In fact, the word that was used was, quote, mountain of evidence. We talked to Ashley Halsey, who's the communications director for the Carroll County Sheriff, about that and the other red flags that stood out to investigators during the investigation. Here's our conversation. Joining us now is the Director of Communications for the Carroll County Sheriff's Office, Ashley Halsey. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. I know it's been a busy week. For people who have just started following this story with word of Sarah Grace's arrest this week, take us back to, if we can, to February 20th, what you remember about that day and where the story really began.
February 20th, we got a call out to the residents in the community of Tyus, a very small community outside of the city of Carrollton here in Carroll County, to 2 deceased victims. Once on scene, it was apparent that they had been shot to death. And of course, the investigation began at that time. We'd received a 911 call from the now 17-year-old daughter, Sarah Patrick, who stated that her younger sister, who was 5 at the time, who is the biological daughter of both victims, had found them deceased in their bed that morning.
How would you characterize Sarah's involvement in the investigation?
I have not personally been dealing with her, but what I can say based on investigator statements is, they interviewed her initially. They've spoken with her 2 or 3 times, obviously, throughout the course of the investigation. And then again, prior to her arrest earlier this week, her father has been a very active role in that as well. But she has, and the family has, been cooperative. We just don't believe she has been truthful.
What about her statements did investigators not find truthful when she started to become a suspect in this?
When we arrived on scene on February 20th and obviously saw these deceased victims who had been shot multiple times, this is a very rural area of Carroll County. There's not a lot of ambient noise and things going on in that area. Very small home that they lived in. When the smallest child, who was forensically interviewed as well through this process, said she heard the gunshots, but the 17-year-old or 16-year-old at the time did not hear the gunshots, that was cause for pause for us early on. But again, throughout the course of the investigation, we had to look at all aspects of the case and follow where the evidence took us. And here we are.
And I know earlier this week you called the evidence against Sarah at this point that your investigators have a quote, mountain of evidence. But it did take almost 6 months to bring her under arrest. It sounds like she was Investigators, the red flags may have been going off pretty early on in the investigation. I know her grandfather just made a statement. I saw it on News Nation, something along the lines of if investigators had evidence, they would have, and it appears he's standing by her, they would have investigated her sooner. Why did it take so long, if you do have this mountain of evidence, to arrest Sarah Grace Patrick?
I feel for her grandfather. I can't imagine being in his shoes and having my grandchild or child in that situation. However, as I'm sure you know, just covering crime stories throughout your career, things don't happen overnight. And when I say mountains of evidence, in the world we live in today, not only do we have forensic evidence, geographical evidence, and digital evidence, those things take time to send the search warrants off, get those returns, have the people sort through those, have the investigators look at what could be pertinent information. And unfortunately, crime labs throughout the United States are backed up. These things do not come to us as soon as we submit them. So the other thing is I think law enforcement gets a bad rap sometimes for rush to judgment. So had we immediately locked her up, I think it would be the other side of the coin where they would say, oh, they rushed to judgment and didn't thoroughly investigate the case. So I stand behind the investigation that we performed at the Carroll County Sheriff's Office. I think they did their due diligence. I think they ruled out other suspects throughout this process as well. So I think this is where it has led us. The evidence has brought us to Sarah Grace.
What do we know about motive at this point?
We're still working on that. Still working on it.
Do you have the murder weapon?
I can't comment on that.
And is she being cooperative now?
So since her arrest on Tuesday, I have not heard any new information from investigators. Obviously, I've been really busy with getting out the information that we released in the press conference. So I'm unable to speak to that at this time.
Has she confessed?
The investigators are working with her diligently.
And I know there's been a lot of talk since her name was announced as the person arrested for these murders. A lot of talk about her social media, especially the TikToks. And she was very active. She was reaching out to creators, asking them to bring awareness to this case. What do you make of that?
You know, I've said this a couple of times. Social media is a platform for a lot of different things. And it seems the younger generation especially wants to put every aspect of their life on social media. So when that happens, it becomes fair game in an investigation like this. And of course, our investigators have been watching the social media as well and continue to trail what is left behind after the arrest. So I would say it has played a role in this investigation also.
How often was she communicating with investigators over the past 6 months?
I would not be able to give you a number on that. I just know that she has been speaking with them throughout the course of this investigation.
Another part that's caught a lot of people's attention was her speaking at the funeral for her mom and stepdad. And I mean, she's very emotional. She's crying. I mean, I don't know what it's like to lose a parent, of course. But was there anything she said during that just stood out to you?
So I did not personally attend the funeral. As I've stated before, anytime we have something horrific like this happen in our community, our investigators are going to attend the funeral, not only to provide emotional support to the grieving family who have lost two family members, but also in this case, not having the arrest by the time the funeral came, just seeing if anything did tilt your head or make you pause while you were there. And for me, watching it online, I wasn't there in person. You know, I don't know if she had real tears. I can't feel that emotion necessarily through watching it online. However, I think, you know, it was more like a speech. It was very scripted. And then at the end, you know, she said, and I'm sorry. Now, she may have been sorry because she was showing emotion possibly throughout that eulogy, if you want to call it that. But she also could have said it meaning something deeper. We just may never know exactly what she meant by that, but it did raise my eyebrows.
What do we know about any documented mental health history that she's had?
I cannot speak to that at this time.
I know another part of your news conference that has a lot of talk is the idea that there could be more arrests. What did you mean by that?
So basically, throughout this course of the investigation and working with Sarah, investigators have been speaking with her throughout. It's very possible that others are involved, whether they had knowledge or whether they assisted. We're still investigating that aspect. We're still conducting interviews this week. So even though an arrest has been made, and we're grateful to bring some closure to the family, as tough as that may be for them, we still have a lot of work to do, and our main goal is to provide full justice for those victims and closure for the families.
And just clarification on that, would you say you're interviewing potential suspects in this case?
We are interviewing potential suspects and anyone that we feel may have information.
And what would you like people who may have communicated with Sarah Grace, and we've talked to some of the TikTok influencers who had communicated with her online when she had reached out. When you're looking for more information, what specifically are you looking for from someone who may have communicated with Sarah Grace Patrick?
So I have said this throughout this week as well, and I'm very thankful for you giving me this platform to be able to come on and speak about this, because we have conversations thousands of times a day with different individuals, right? So there may be someone out there, whether it's someone local here in our community, someone that was friends with Sarah or her family, that may have had conversations throughout the course of this investigation. And now that this has come to light that Sarah is in custody, maybe those conversations mean something different now. And if that's the case, and you feel like you may hold a piece of that puzzle that will help bring continued closure for this family, then I urge anyone with that information, even if they think it's insignificant, in the grand scheme of things, it could be big for us. Please contact the Carroll County Sheriff's Office and speak to us about this. If Sarah has reached out to you or you've had conversations with her that maybe doesn't sit right with you now, please reach out to us.
And just in the course of your investigation, and I know, you said the family has been cooperative, and I just think about what they're going through, not just the loss, but having to process all of this. What did people say about the relationship that Sarah had with her mom and stepdad?
Unfortunately, I couldn't tell you firsthand information because I have not personally spoken to the families. Just like everybody else, the investigators have been talking to them, but I've kind of been watching their reactions through social media. So I don't have personal knowledge of what their thoughts or feelings are other than what I have seen myself on social media.
And I think about the now 6-year-old girl and the story that Sarah Grace told your investigators, that it was that young girl who found her mom and dad. I just can't imagine. Do we know whether that story actually happened, or if Sarah Grace is the one who did this? Is that something that she just told investigators on the phone?
We have reason to believe that it happened that way. I mean, through evidence and through forensic interviews, we believe that the child located them deceased that morning.
Okay. Well, and Ashley, is there anything more? I know we talked about some of the calls for the public right now, that this is a fluid investigation, that it takes time for investigations, but what question am I not asking as I have you here now, and so many people are curious about this case? What is it that you want people to know?
I just want them to know that we have been and we are working this case. It is not something that has been put on the wayside. We've been working it since the day we stepped foot on the property on February 20th. We will continue to work it until we get the answers that not only we seek, but so that we can talk more to the public, hopefully in the maybe days, weeks, and months to come, to be able to provide a full picture. We may never know what went through Sarah's head. We may never get the full story, but hopefully we can provide further clarity and more answers, especially to the family, because they're the ones that deserve it over everybody else. And at the end of the day, the 5-year-old sister, she is 100% the true innocent victim in all of this.
No, I absolutely agree. I just keep thinking about that little girl. I know you're keeping some things close to the vest, and I understand that with the investigation, but what is the timeline of when you would believe that we could learn more about this, in your words, mountain of evidence against Sarah Grace Patrick?
So because we're in the phase that we're in now, she's been charged. Obviously, there's still evidence that's being processed as we speak. So, hopefully throughout the process, getting with the district attorney's office, seeing how they're going to handle this case, I believe that's when you would learn more. It'd really be up to the district attorney's office once the indictment comes to be able to shed more light on that aspect of the case.
And is there a timeline of when there could be more arrests?
No, not at this time. Still investigating. Still a very fluid, active case while we speak.
All right, Ashley Holsey, the Director of Communications for the Carroll County Sheriff's Office. We really appreciate your time. Thanks for being here on Law&Crime.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Sarah Grace Patrick is charged with 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of aggravated assault. That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law&Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.